So I am a public school kid, grew up in the city.
In what city?
In St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Went to the same high school my dad did. And that I think is a very common conversation, and particularly in Midwestern cities. You grow up, you're multiple generations, you live blocks away from where your family grew up, your parents grew up. And yet I didn't have the same education that my father had. My father graduated from high school in 1944, left a few months after graduation, went into the Second World War like men did during that time. He had a stellar education. His 12 years of education, because there was no kindergarten for him at that time, unbelievable vocabulary, could do math in his head like you wouldn't believe. Came back from the war and didn't go to college. Didn't take advantage of the GI Bill because no one he knew went to college. No one he grew up with. No one in his neighborhood. None of the guys that he was aboard ship with. It was different. You went to work, and it was time to go to work. And years later, I talked to my dad about that. Lost him a few years ago, and he said that was his biggest regret in his life, that he didn't go to college. I graduated from high school in 1981, almost 40 years later, right? I went to 12 years of school. I had 13 with kindergarten. I went to the same amount of time, and you think about what happened between 1944 and 1981, and the fact that we were going to deliver the content and prepare someone in the same way for two vastly different worlds. And then you speed up in our earlier conversation about the pace of change today, and my children are going to 12, 13 years of school. And what's happened between 1981 and 2015 in our world. So I got into the work of education in a lot of ways because that didn't make sense to me, that I was not as prepared. I did not have the vocabulary. I mean, my dad drove a cab. I was 25 years as a cab driver. And what his knowledge, what his skill set was far outweighed what mine was as a college educated person. How did we get to this? How are we not advancing? How is it not the reverse? How am I not leaving high school with more than my father would have left? So I wanted to pursue that work, and I met, I worked in a lot of neighborhoods, did community development work, and saw that kids didn't even get what I got. Kids who were growing up in high-rise public housing, immigrant families, and so I got into the work actually through community education. So what spoke to me mostly was that these were the public schools, not just public schools, and that communities had a right to determine what was going on in those buildings based on their wants and needs. And that the one-size-fit-all didn't work. It didn't work for me. It certainly wasn't going to work in the future because the world is so different.